All right, hello, hello. We're back again for another Other Ink Thursday, and I am joined once again, to my great delight, by Tristan Zimmerman of Molten Sulfur Press. Tristan, hello.
Hey Matt, delight to be here.
We've been talking the news and talking the industry and all kinds of things. So it's now, but now we're going to talk about two of your blog posts, as we do here from time to time. So. Let's just jump right in. What blog posts have been on the blog, Molten Sulfur Press or moltensulfurblog.com, right?
Yeah, moltensulfur.com.
Moltensulfur.com.
On moltensulfur.com, just a super quick recap. Every month I publish a blog post talking about something from real history or real folklore, something worth learning about in its own right. And then I talk about how you can file the serial numbers off of that and drop it into the campaign that you are already running as gameable material. And the thing that we're going to start out talking about is the Battle of Cunaxa in 401 BC. This was a battle as part of a short civil war in the Achaemenid Persian Empire. This is the first Persian Empire, the one that listeners may be most familiar with from its conquest by Alexander the Great, that Persian Empire. Um, and I I have this fascination with as RPG material, wars and battlefields, right? Because great stories come from conflict, whether it's interpersonal conflict or inner conflict or what have you. Conflict is a driver of story, and battles and wars are they're conflict. I don't know if anybody's noticed, and they because they kind of have through lines, or it's easy to pick out or perhaps impose post hoc a through line. They have it takes no effort to make them compelling stories. The issue from an RPG perspective is that most RPGs, particularly most popular RPGs, have a focus, a strong theme of combat and violence, but they do really, really well on like 5-on-5 kind of fights, right?
Right,
And
right.
when it's 50,000 on 50,000, these games tend to fall apart or not work so well. And sure, some of them have like mass combat rules or whatever, but those almost never are as much fun as the core rules of the game. So what do you do about that? And what you do about that, if you're having, your RPG campaign has gone into a war, what you do about that is you find particular moments where you can boil this larger conflict down to kind of a 5-on-5 sort of fight, right? Where it's like, oh, if somebody can take this signal tower, then that will decide the battle. The whole battle hinges on whether you can take this signal tower. So send the PCs to go take that signal tower from the handful of enemy troops that are up there. And so I have been writing for years now about individual moments on historical battlefields that you can use in your campaigns, right? You can file the serial numbers off of them. And the Battle of Cunaxa in 401 BC has this incredible moment. Um, the the Battle of Cunaxa I mentioned was part of a civil war between the Emperor of Persia, Artaxerxes II, and his younger brother, a usurper by the name of Cyrus the Younger. If you know a Cyrus in Persian history, it's not that one. He's not that guy. Um, and Cyrus the Younger was the younger brother of Artaxerxes II, but he felt that he deserved the throne. And he was
Classic dynastic contest.
exactly. And he was the governor, he was the satrap out in Anatolia, what is today Turkey, and controlled large swaths of modern Turkey as the regional governor. And that included armies, right? Regional governors, satraps in the Persian Empire had their own armies. And that was necessary given the large size of the empire. And so Artaxerxes decided he was going to use his army to try to overthrow his brother. The trick is, of course, he's got a decent sized army, but his brother has an enormous army because he is the emperor of this enormous empire. And it's an empire that's just absolutely famous for its skill at logistics. So even though the Persian army, the imperial Persian army, is spread to the four winds, if Artaxerxes gets word that his brother is coming for him, he can recall the army. And so Cyrus's plan is, I gotta get my brother before he has a chance to recall the army and the army has a chance to get there and back him up. So I gotta move fast. So he takes his army, which,
Can I interrupt just a little bit?
yeah.
Like for map people, like how big is like the rest of the? I mean, I know like geographical territorial control is not the same as like troop numbers or whatever, but like, are we talking about like all of what is now Iran and a good chunk of Iraq and down into Egypt and out into Central Asia? Like how much is
So
arrayed against the satrapy of Anatolia?
it's as far west as the Mediterranean. In fact, as far west as modern Istanbul, as far south as Upper Egypt. So that is inland Egypt, and Egypt at this time is just a total superpower, even though it is part of the Persian Empire. The Persians conquered it a couple of emperors ago. But like in terms of population and wealth, Egypt is a huge deal that you kind of can't put anything else up against. So Egypt is kind of a thing unto itself when it comes to like, really, you're going to go up against Egypt? To say nothing of basically all of modern Iran, all of modern Iraq, north up into, I believe, Armenia, and I want to say some of what is today Western Afghanistan.
All right.
So
So
big,
yeah, big, real
big,
big, real big. Thank you
real
for
big.
that visual. I'm a map person and I can visualize all those things. If you're not, I'm sorry for this interruption.
Whereas Cyrus the Younger has, about a third, maybe a quarter of what is today Turkey. So
Right.
yeah, he's got to move fast. Um, and he brings his army, which includes 13,000 Greek mercenaries. These are kind of the best troops in his army. Um, and we may wind up talking about them on a later call because these are, if anybody at home knows of Xenophon's Anabasis, these are those Greeks. But
Ah, yes,
Cyrus,
those Greeks.
yeah, those guys. Cyrus marches on the capital in Babylon, in what is today Iraq. Marches as fast as he can, but not quite fast enough. He is technically successful in that Artaxerxes has not had a chance to recall the entire army, but he's managed to recall a lot of it. And so when the two sides line up at Cunaxa, they are on the banks of, I believe, the Tigris River. No, the Euphrates. Well, this is embarrassing. They're lined up on the banks of a river.
I
Um,
believe you wrote Euphrates in the blog post. So
Terrific. I am vindicated. They line up, and there's a huge amount we don't know about how ancient battles were fought, right? We got this really interesting thing where we've got all these ancient historical accounts of like, oh, this is how the battle went down. Um, but there's important details about how these battles were fought that nobody bothered to write down because everybody knows this, right? We don't have to tell you, the reader, this. So there are a lot of question marks about the details of how this worked. But you have these two long lines, and the armies are lines, and each of these lines, Cyrus's line and Artaxerxes's line, have one end at the river. So the other side can't get around that side and get you
mm,
from
mm,
behind.
mm.
Um, and the side of the emperor, Artaxerxes, is like half again as long, maybe twice as long as the usurper Cyrus's line, because the emperor has a bigger army. So that's not a great look. And the usurper tells his Greek mercenaries, his best troops, all right, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go after my brother. I want you to target him specifically. Both the usurper and the emperor have placed themselves in the middle of their forces, which was traditional for Persian emperors on the battlefield. There's a bunch of advantages to being in the middle, not least is it means that your orders have to move the shortest distance to reach the ends. Um, go straight at him. But of course, because one line is longer than the other, the emperor is way up here, right? They're not directly opposite each other because the middles of lines of different lengths are in different places.
Yeah.
And so, okay, I need you to go straight at him. The problem was when they lined up in these lines, the Greeks were not directly opposite the emperor, right? The emperor's up here and the Greeks are kind of down here. So the order was, I need you to go kind of at a diagonal, right? Straight after the emperor. It's unclear why. We don't know why the Greeks did not follow those orders, but they went straight across and they hit the line here and they just kept going, right? Like you smash these guys, you make them run. They're running. In ancient warfare, one thing we are very confident in is that when one side breaks and runs, that's when the real killing begins. It's kind of light killing up to then, but as soon as one side runs, hey, guess what? It's really hard to protect your back, right? Because
Right.
they're behind you, they're stabbing you. So the Greeks, they see an opportunity, right? Like, oh, we can kill a lot of them. So they just pursue. And now the usurper's best troops are off the battlefield and continuing onwards. And the other two lines, they're advancing on one another. Now, it seems like the usurper's troops opposite the emperor choose not to attack the emperor. This may have been because their generals were just like, I'm gonna hedge my bets, right?
Mm,
What if we lose this
right.
battle? Like the emperor will be real mad at me if I had my troops attack him specifically, or it might have just been the common soldiers saying, there is a taboo on spilling royal blood. Like instead of attacking here, maybe I'm just gonna attack over this way and over this way. So nobody's going after the emperor, and the usurper sees this and he says, "Oh, absolutely not! Right? I don't have enough. My army is smaller to begin with. My best troops are off the field. My only hope to win this battle is to take out my brother, the emperor." So he takes the troops around him, which are a few hundred personal cavalry, his generals, his bodyguards, his advisors, the so-called table companions, the men who are like his personal friends, the people that he eats dinner with, really important people. And he says, guys, we're going after my brother. We're going after him directly. So they go cutting right across the battlefield. And as the usurper is approaching the emperor's troops do basically the same thing, right? Where they're just like, I'm not going to attack the usurper directly. He's the emperor's brother. I'm going to attack over here and like not go after him. So what you wind up with is the situation where uh, what seems to me incredibly implausibly, but we have a bunch of documentation, including from people who seem to be eyewitnesses, supporting the claim that the core body of the emperor and the core body of the usurper directly fought it out. And these reports indicate that the emperor and the usurper personally fought it out, right?
Yeah.
That they came to blows person to person.
I mean, this is very unusual in ancient warfare, it seems.
Yeah, like this
You
is
know,
bizarre. This is some fairy tale nonsense, right? Like, oh yeah, and then the king and his brother, like they stabbed each other on the battlefield. Like, what? Are you crazy? Like,
I
how
mean,
would this even happen? This is how it
well,
happens, apparently.
I mean, like you get like, oh, I challenge you to a, let's not endanger our men. This is a personal conflict. Come fight me one on one in the middle. You get those kind of dramatic scenes in stories and film and stuff like that. But like to accidentally end up like everybody else has run away, left, or been killed, and then like now all that's left is for our combat to occur. That it doesn't happen very often. Doesn't happen very often.
Yeah. So, the we have this suggestion that the emperor's like personal troops got driven off by the usurper's like personal cavalry, and of course the personal cavalry chased after these guys. So it
Right.
really came down to like the emperor and the usurper and their respective table companions slugging it out.
And
And
and this is what you were saying at the beginning about like you got to get it down to the point of like 5 on 5. This is where
exactly. And so what you once we get down to this level of detail, right? Like a 5 on 5 level of detail, the sources really do kind of stop broadly aligning with one another, except
mm,
for, agreeing that like, yeah, like I maintain that these two brothers like legitimately did stab each other. But kind of your best good faith effort to reconcile the sources kind of suggests that um the the usurper stabs the emperor through his breastplate. It's a terrible wound, but not a fatal one. And the emperor responds by hitting the usurper in the head. And that is a fatal wound. And of course, there's other versions of the story, and honestly, some of them are really interesting. But this is the kind of the most gameable version of the story. Um, and then one of the usurper's table companions, sees his dead boss, leaps off his horse to like cover his dead boss with his body, and the emperor hands one of his people a ceremonial dagger used in animal sacrifice and says, "Sacrifice that man. We don't do, our religion, we don't do human sacrifice. Human sacrifice that man. Use the ritual dagger, give him the same cuts that you would give to a sacrificial bull, um, and human sacrifice him right here, right now." And that happens. And
I can't tell if that's an insult or like a sort of like praising your enemies kind of a thing, like
yeah,
honoring
I
your
don't know.
fallen enemies. I don't know.
And then cuts off the dead usurper's head and hands, and that's kind of it, right? The battle then rolls up. The usurper's force was probably going to lose anyway, and then without the emperor on the field, of course, things kind of fall apart. But yeah, this is incredibly gameable because all you need in order to make the situation happen, where a small number of people can alter the outcome of the battle, is have your player characters be appointed to bodyguards of the person leading one side in a battle, right? And you can follow this chain of logic, the kind of what the ancient sources suggest happened in real history, um, to the point where it's the party and the person they are protecting against the opposing leader and the people protecting her. Um, and you can kind of get all the other, because of course there's tens of thousands, potentially hundreds of thousands of people at the Battle of Cunaxa. And you can kind of get them out of the way by just saying, oh, they're all paired off, right? There's there for everybody near this battle map that I've slapped on the table. For every person from one side, there's somebody else from the other side, and they're duking it out. So like, don't worry about it. And you can almost turn all these other NPCs into terrain, right? Like, oh,
Hmm.
it's all difficult terrain because they're all busy and they're just kind of surrounding you, have the space that you can fight in. And
It's
um
almost like a series of like nested roles or whatever, where it's like, make some roles, whatever they are, like, great, you won those roles, now you're closer to them. And if you fail the roles, then they're closer to you. And like it's still the same sort of like gentle railroading of like the getting closer to your opponent, breaking through each layer of the nested doll, right, to get down to the center of the army.
yeah, that is absolutely one way you can do it. A lot
I
of
mean,
it's gonna
for a little bit of build up before
yeah.
like the actual, and now we're going to roll initiative and we're really going to fight this out,
Mhm.
with our close combat.
A lot of it's going to depend on table culture, right?
Hmm.
What your players are comfortable with. My players um, generally, I think would be very comfortable if I said, "Hey guys, what if I give you just like this very brief narration
Mm,
of the battlefield, and then like we just move straight to the fight? Like, I generally my players would be like, "Oh yeah, that sounds really cool." Like, "Oh, you have this cool set piece fight prepared. I'm excited for a cool set piece fight, Tristan. Let's do it."
right.
But not all groups are going to be that way, right? Some
Right.
groups are going to insist on, hey, I want to watch it play out, and maybe it doesn't happen, and maybe all your prep work is for nothing. But
Well, that's what I would say about like gentle railroading. Like if
mhm.
your players succeed or fail, doesn't matter. You're into the next layer of the event, you know. Uh, but I love your thing. You're like, look, the exciting thing here is when we get to the end. So like here's the montage, like around the table, flash of the battle. Like what's something you do in the battle, right? Boom, 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 boom. Everybody gives their little narration. Great. All of that has happened. It's a huge battle. Suffice to say, now we're at the climax. Here we go. And then it like you're ready for drama now because like, oh, brother, I see you. It's like we don't need to make a bunch of skill rolls. Some like
So
you say, player table culture, right? Some people
mhm.
are really into that. I am fascinated when I come up with a table that's like, ooh, I'm ready for the drama immediately. Like no setup needed. Like this is a dramatic situation. Great. I hate my enemy. Like they don't need to build it up for 45 minutes. Anyway.
So if you want to do a montage, the thing I would recommend is something that I am blatantly stealing from Kevin Kulp, the co-designer of Swords of the Serpentine. Something that Kevin does for montages in games that he runs is, whether it's a travel montage or whatever, he will turn to one player and say, um, "Give me a problem." Right? A
Hmm.
problem that the party faces, and then you just like, there's a swamp and it's really sticky and it slows us down. And then he turns to the next player and he says, "Now give me a solution. Tell me how you guys overcame that." And that player will tell will say how it was overcome, and then that same player who just provided the solution provides a new problem, and then the player beside her provides a solution to that problem and a new problem, and you go all the way around the table, and then the first player, who only got to offer problem, offers the solution to the final problem.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's very
That
fast. It does a really good job of like setting a scene, and sometimes it winds up kind of creating little details that become relevant in the thing that happens at the end of the montage, right? Like, oh, somebody said something about like, um, having to get around this like really big scary dude in the fight. Oh, I don't think we can take him. Like, we're gonna go around him, and now, like, hey, the big scary dude can kind of be the threat lurking just off scene. Like, we better wrap this up quick, or the big scary dude is gonna make his way here. So anyway, it's a really great way to handle montages, not least because it is so quick and easy. So
yeah.
props to Kevin Culp on that one.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So I mean, I don't want to like you've got some other ideas, I'm sure, for like before we move on to the other story. Like we haven't, like what's some other we haven't really talked about the serial numbers filed off version of this.
Oh
We're
yeah,
into it. We're into it. But like
yeah,
I
we're
feel
just
like
doing it.
I think there's
Um,
more of it that you have to say. I
one
feel.
one thing that I would really strongly recommend doing is um, in a lot of in among most of the most popular RPGs, if you have a bunch of allied NPCs on your side fighting
Mm,
alongside the player characters, it can bog things down really quick. So it's generally best to avoid that. One allied NPC usually doesn't mess things up. That is usually fine. So you're gonna want to have the general or the queen or whatever that the player characters are protecting. You're going to want to have her in the fight, right? It's too cool not to. That way you can also threaten, like, oh no, what if she dies? Like, what if she dies? That sounds like really interesting stakes. But also having her there means you can have the two generals be trash talking each other through the whole fight, and that's really fun. And then on the other side, it's, the opposing general and then her bodyguards, and they can be really tough and statted out in fun ways. And then it's roughly equally sized forces, and just make sure you give them some fun abilities, and make sure that it is a tactically fun and interesting combat. We already talked about using the the surrounding people, the surrounding troops, kind of as terrain. So if you're playing in a system where terrain makes combat more fun, like absolutely do that thing. And yeah, that's how I would handle it.
One other idea I had when I was reading through your post was about this idea of like the prohibition on shedding royal blood and uh, translating that into some other. The one that I thought of is like some sort of sci-fi setting where like this is an alien who has some sort of toxic blood and you don't want to cut them because like it's gonna be bad for you. So it's a prohibition on it, but on, because there are like consequences. So like everybody on in the armies is like, we're not going to fight the big, we're not going to fight the big green alien queen warrior. Like that, she'll bleed on us, you know?
Yeah, I
And,
dig it.
so then you've got this sort of, because, like, and this is sort of a whole other topic about the difference between standing in a line and firing a bunch of guns in a direction and killing whoever you kill versus like the sort of you got to get in there with your shoulder pads and push people out of the way and stab, people in the belly. That's very different ways of fighting, but like this sort of ancient way where like you had to kill somebody, you had to walk up to them. I mean, you have arrows and you can throw spears and stuff like that, but like a lot of the combat is you got to get real close,
Yeah.
so why
You
would
you got to
you?
watch his face as he dies, right? Like you
Yeah,
got to watch him as you kill him, which
right.
is different.
Yeah. And so why would you not want there's more reasons that you would not want to do that than sort of like the 18th century and 19th century way of like seven ranks of people all firing whatever. I mean that's all kinds of you don't even see the people because there's smoke in the way. It's a very different um sort of battling. There wouldn't be that pressure to like, oh, not get up there and get the blood on you or whatever, but anyway, I don't know if that was my idea that I was adding, but like, is there more to say about that sort of prohibition on slaying royalty, or is that just sort of that's part of, you know, I don't know.
Beside the idea, and I love the idea, and even if you don't want to do like the alien queen or whatever, you can do it where like, yeah, no, this we're in a fantasy setting. Royal blood is magical, right? Like it is
Mm,
different from regular blood. That is part of being royalty is, there is a divine essence in royal blood. So, don't get it on you because, you'll take holy damage.
mm,
But also you can totally do social consequences, right? Where, hey, boy, we sure are glad that you guys won the day. That's terrific. But did you have to kill
right.
the enemy royal? Because that's, you know, we got a big taboo on that. That's no good. Why did you do that? And now that's something the player characters have to carry with them, which is, a very Game of Thrones thing, frankly, right? The
Mm,
Jaime Lannister, nobody respects him because he killed a king. And boy, everybody's sure glad that he killed that king, but nonetheless, like you can't do that. So
right. Especially in a system where I think we talked about this with one of the episodes about you know the Sahel and those cultures there. Like there was a you weren't allowed to kill the king. So like the guy was I he was sent to an island because you can't kill the king, and then like this stuff like that. There was a lot of it's it's not that it's just this Persian context. I mean, there's lots of context where like
yeah,
you don't want you don't want people around if you're a king who relies on like a monarchical respect system. You don't want people around you who have proven they don't respect that system.
yeah,
Even if
yeah.
they did your dirty work, you still don't want them around.
Um,
um
in the Byzantine Empire, there was a I don't know if it was a taboo or a law or if it was, six
mm,
of one, half dozen of the other, but you couldn't be emperor if your body was physically imperfect, right? If you had an obvious disfigurement. So the way that deposing monarchs was done is you would cut off their nose or you would blind them, so that you haven't killed the emperor because you don't want to set that precedent that like, hey, I'm the emperor now, but I guess it's open season on emperors, but neither do you have to worry that they're going to be able to come back, raise an army because everybody's going to be like, ooh, I really
Mm,
liked you, Michael, but you're you don't have any eyes now,
right.
and that means you can't be emperor. So I'm not gonna follow you. And of course, there were instances. I'm aware of at least one blinded emperor who managed to regain his throne. So, that's frankly, it's something we're going to talk about in the next thing, where
Mm,
human. One of the fun things about being a human is that we have all of these social conventions that we say, oh yeah, these are the rules, this is how this works, and then you start like pointing at individual instances, and it never quite lines up to how everyone agrees, like, oh, this is definitely how it
it's
works, and it works like
yeah.
this in all cases. Like, well, what about that guy? Well, that's a special case. Like, well, what about that lady? Like, oh, that's a special case. Like, seems like you got more special cases in your society than you have people following the rule, but everybody
It's
agrees the rule is the rule, and it's
what's the
definitely always followed.
what's the law of average thing where like no one is actually average sized or
Hmm.
whatever, because average is mixing together all, average is not individualized. It's that thing. So having mentioned the next thing, like, why don't we move on to the next topic? Like,
Yeah.
what is your what's the other gameable
So
piece of history here?
So the other thing we're going to talk about today is Albanian blood feuds. Now, Albania is a country in the Balkans. It's kind of just northwest of Greece. It's along the coast of the Adriatic Sea, just opposite the boot of Italy. And Albania has this kind of coastal plain that is then surrounded by mountainous highlands on all sides. And the coastal plain has long been under some kind of state control. But state control, as far as I'm aware, didn't really reach the Albanian highlands until the 1920s. Mountains are just really hard to govern, right? It's just really hard for centralized government, whether that's the Albanian monarchy or the Ottoman Empire or whatever, to just like send people into the mountains and make the mountain people do what you tell them, because it's really hard to get around, blah, 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 all kinds of reasons, but mountains in general, hard to govern. So before state control, before, oh, somebody did me wrong, so I can reliably go to a judge, I can go to a magistrate, and I can get justice. Um, the way the Albanian Highlanders handled, hey, you killed my brother, was with blood feuds. And again, this kind of didn't end until the 1920s. Um, or the 1920s is when it started to be wrapped up. I will note, I guess I'll just open with this downer note, which is that there are still Albanian blood feuds. A 2018 review found 704 families in Albania that are still affected by blood feuds, right? Like have an ongoing blood feud that in many cases like makes their lives terrible because they can't go outside for fear that someone will kill them. So anyway, we're going to be talking about historical blood feuds, but we do have to acknowledge that like for some people this is still a thing.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
but these blood feuds um, had kind of some very intricate traditions surrounding them, where the blood feud would usually be begun by a murder. You know, Matt, your brother killed my brother, and I need to take vengeance on your brother, or really just someone from your family, right?
Right.
Someone, maybe you. Oh no.
Right.
Someone from your family needs to die in order to balance the scales. Um, if I pull this off, that has the option of ending the feud. We're even. However, your family also has the option of continuing the feud. You can say, you killed my brother for the second time. You killed another one of my brothers. Now I'm going to kill one of your brothers. So that is considered an extension of the same feud. So if you say, you know what, we're even now, I'm going to let this lie, that feud is closed, but you absolutely have the option of reopening it and continuing it. If I kill if you kill my brother and I kill two of your brothers, one of those deaths closes the feud. The other death is a new feud. And this is important. This will matter. It's not, oh no, the feud has escalated. It's not an
Mm.
escalation of the same feud. No, it is one feud is closed and a new feud is open. A second unrelated feud has been opened between us. And
But
now
between the
you,
same two families,
but
like,
between the same two families. And now you're in a position where you have to kill one of my brothers, and you have
right.
the option of reopening the first feud by killing another of my brothers. Um, this I have just laid this out in, crystal clear, black and white. These are the rules.
Right,
Welcome to
right.
being a human being. Like, in any individual feud, like, how, like, do the rules get followed perfectly? Also, there's regional differences in the rules. Also, two families in the same region may not agree on whether this particular regional distinction is valid. Also.
Yeah.
Now, let's say you have killed my brother and I need to kill one of your brothers. Now, I could just go out and lie in wait for one of your brothers and kill him. I could round up all of my family members to go and kill your brother. Ideally, my brother's murder will be avenged by one of the dead man's brothers. That's the perfect case scenario. But if push comes to shove, it's totally fine if the death is avenged by his father, his son, his his father's brother's son.
His
Um,
sister's husband,
Not allowed.
Oh, that's not allowed.
Not allowed. It's
All right.
only allowed to go along male lines. That is
All right.
right out. However, there are exceptions.
Yeah, right.
Uh, a blood brother is okay. So if the dead man
Mm.
and his sister's husband were very close and had sworn a blood brotherhood, that in some regions would be permissible. Um, if, of course,
What if you
that
got too much
region
like hay to pile and you just can't you got to hire in some help for the feud? How's that work?
Well, we're gonna get there, and I know you're steering me, but there's some more details I want to
Oh
mention
yeah.
because like
Okay,
it's
okay.
intricacies all the way down. If I need to avenge someone, I am allowed to round up a posse, and this
Mm.
posse certainly should include my male relatives, the male relatives of the dead man. But also, I am totally allowed to loop in the tenants and servants of the dead man, totally permitted, and they're not allowed to say no. If I come to them and say I'm organizing a posse, you're in, they have to say yes. But if they volunteer to come along without having to be asked first, they earn prestige for doing that. um the if one of them, if someone outside the family but in the posse, avenges the dead man's death, that closes the feud. B, that it is understood for the purposes if the other family wants to reopen the feud, it is understood that the killing shot was not fired by this tenant over here who's unrelated, even though it literally was. It is understood that the killing shot was fired by the brother who was leading the posse, that the tenant is supposed to be outside the feud. Once the posse is dissolved, the tenant is no longer part of the feud. He is not a valid target for revenge. Um, but there's complications all the way down.
Mhm.
What if the tenant fired the shot and the other family wants to reopen the feud, but the so-called valid targets, what if they're hard to get to? What if they're not around? What if they scarpered, right? And nobody has seen them, and it's been 5 years, and this feud is still open. Like, maybe you kill the tenant. Maybe that's how you handle it. Um, there's it's there are these clear cut rules that often run headfirst into the complicated reality of being a living person.
Yeah.
And then you just kind of have to navigate those. And maybe the other side doesn't agree. Maybe the other side says, oh, no, that tenant, that was unrelated. We're going to treat this as you opening a new feud with us. This is not a continuation of the old feud. Blah blah blah. Other rules: women are not allowed to be part of the system. Part of this was a cultural taboo on women carrying firearms. Um, but that then meant that in cases where a woman did avenge her dead brother, because it happened, because welcome to being a human being, it's complicated and messy, then what she has done is she has opened a new feud, unrelated. And the old feud that is still open, the one that she closed in scare quotes by avenging her dead brother, like, nope, that feud is still open. She has just started a new one. If a Catholic priest is killed, his whole congregation is allowed to avenge him as if they were his brothers. But Orthodox priests and imams are not extended that same privilege.
I
Um,
assume that's because Catholic priests aren't supposed to be married, and the
so
other two are allowed
I'm
to be.
genuinely uncertain.
Okay.
Um, you're not allowed to burn down your target's house with the idea that, like, oh, he's in his house, I'll get him while because what if his wife and children are in there with him? Those guys, those are off limits. So what you often wind up with is, if you know that you are the likely target of a feud, like, yeah, you just have to stay in your house. And there are absolutely historically documented cases of people like living out long lives in the darkness of their houses, which of course is a terrible burden on their family, drags the whole family down into poverty. It's a big deal. There's a lot of like these old stone houses that are built with like teeny tiny little windows, with the understanding that, like, yeah, at some point somebody living in here is going to be the target of a feud, and we want to make sure they don't get shot. Um,
Hmm.
and but okay, hiring people in, right?
Because
What
again, this is where the PCs are
This
the
is where the PCs come in. This is
this
the
is where
whole
the
point.
PCs are going to come in.
What if what if, Matt, you kill my brother?
Uh-huh. I would
And
never, but what if?
thank goodness, since I don't have one. But what if you kill my brother?
Anymore. Bah, bah,
Oh
bah.
no! What if you kill my brother? And my brother was the last man in my family who was of an age where he could reasonably be expected to avenge this wrong, right? He doesn't have any sons who will grow up to be old enough to avenge him. His father is dead or is too old to go sit out at night in the dark and wait for you to show your face. You just It's off the table. Well, we can't. We, the non-combatant members of the family, can't let our brother's death lie unavenged. So we go hire someone to do the dirty work for us. And this is treated, or was treated theoretically, differently from gathering up a posse. Um, Volunteering to join a posse was honorable, it brought prestige. Agreeing to be hired on as a hitman was dishonorable. It brought negative attention. So as a consequence, it tended to be done only by people who are already kind of on the outside polite society. So vagabonds, Roma, people who belonged to families that had men in them that had done dishonorable things. These were the sorts of people who would agree to be hired to serve as hitmen to participate in a feud. Well, disreputable people and vagabonds, like, that's an alarming number of player characters. Um, so the party, like, this is kind of a self-evident adventure hook. Party gets approached by someone saying, "Hey, are
You
you
look
willing?"
like disreputable vagabonds who like to murder people, or who might have
Yeah,
some skills at murder. How about you take this little sack of silver and go like get this guy?
and go avenge my dead brother. Like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And okay, so that's a
Very
very
sad story.
that's a very straightforward adventure hook, which honestly, in a lot of contexts, is very good, right? Like, why make it complicated? If it's straightforward, go ahead and use it. However, um, one of the things about, if we want to use this template for an adventure hook, is the people who are getting hired in are on the outs with society. They're outsiders. So if we are adopting that part of the Albanian blood feud, we don't have to, of course, it's your campaign, do what you want. But if you want to use that, then what you're probably looking at is the players getting hired in to participate in a blood feud in a culture that is not their own, right? They're being hired in as outsiders. And that sounds like a real dicey proposition because you are participating in a high stakes cultural thing where you don't know all the rules because you didn't grow up in this culture.
Yeah.
It's not a natural part of you. And maybe you can ask people to like fill you in on the rules, but they're probably not going to be able to tell you all the rules. They're certainly not going to be able to tell you all the edge cases because a lot of the edge cases are going to just kind of be intuitive, right? Like, oh, well, naturally it follows because of this thing. Like, well, you didn't tell me that thing. Well, I don't need to tell you that thing. That's obvious. Um, and so now you're in a situation where things can get complicated or messy real fast. So obviously, your target might fight back, right? Like that's easy mode. People don't like getting shot at, generally speaking. So your target might fight back. Um, Second, the credit for the kill should go to the person who hired the party. That's the way it should work. But what if that person can't be found? What if that person has scarpered? What if that person is not considered a valid target, right? That person, there are ways where it could be valid to hire in an outsider and the person doing the hiring is a valid target, like if the hirer is an old man. But like, what if the hirer is a woman? What if there is no valid target that the family of the person the players are killing, like that family then has no one to vent their anger on. This feud can never be closed. Well, I guess now the player characters are going to be the target.
Right.
Like that is a thing that can happen. Um,
You can
it,
never come back to your fantasy version of Albania
yeah.
because they'll be waiting for you.
And then one other let's see here, another complication. So in northwestern Albania, there was a tradition that hiring an outsider was disreputable, right? Like this is not a part of Albania where like, oh, in an extreme circumstance, it's understandable if you do this. Like, no, the only person who would do something so terrible is a witch. So definitionally, if you get hired on, were hired on by a witch because only a witch would do that. Witches exist outside the blood feud system because they are so gross and icky and disreputable that they cannot participate in an honor-based system, which means the hirelings are the next best target for retaliation. And then
And these are
finally,
things. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Well, finally, just
finally, there's always the possibility. I've been listing ways that, people could rules lawyer, like, oh, we gotta retaliate against the player characters. There's always the possibility that the family that the players are acting against will just say, forget the rules, right? Like this is gross. I don't like that my brother was murdered by a hireling. I'm gonna get those hirelings, right? Like that's always a possibility.
yeah. I what I was gonna say is it, it, why I forgot what I was think I'm going to lead, but the all of these complications. I mean, this is a theme of you and your adventure design and a lot of your hooks, where it's like, I mean, the hook is fine, right? Like,
Hmm.
great, but like the hook is almost like a hook to get you on the other hook, because like
Yes.
it's gonna you're a huge fan of the complications, right? So
Yes.
like you said, it's like, oh yeah, it's a simple job. All you got to do is kill this guy. Like you're a party of adventurers. You can handle one, killing of one NPC, in almost any setting that you're going to be applying this to. It's like, but you don't even know what can because you're not familiar with any of these. That's what I was going to say. Like all of these, but what if the family does this? Like that's what you were
Hmm.
saying before about like you don't have any idea as an outsider the implications of what you've agreed to. You just know that like uh, I got the bag of money, I'm gonna do the thing, but then like now you've opened whole new vistas of people being annoyed at you that you weren't even aware were possible.
Yeah, I entirely agree. It's the thing. It's one of the things that I love most about role-playing games as a medium is that we people who like one another, we people who ideally are dear and beloved friends, come together to sit around a table and tell a story where none of us know how the story is going to end, right? That's the thing I love about it. And um so what I want is the fastest route to get my party from the situation where everyone here at this table knows how this is going to go, or at a minimum, I, the GM, I know how this is going to go, to the messy, complicated situation where even I, the GM, who have all my notes and all my prep work, I have no idea how this is going to go. I have no clue. Because if the party does something slightly different, then they knock down this domino and this person doesn't like it and this person does like it. And the next thing you know, we have taken this campaign in a direction and we're going on adventures that would have been impossible for me to foresee at the beginning. And yeah, that's what I love. It's also a lot easier to prep because you don't have to do the okay, and then they're going to do this, and then they're going to do that, and then they're going to do this, and then they're going to do that. Instead, it's just okay, here's 3 to 5 like complicated, messy things, and each individual one is kind of straightforward, but they can collide with one another and interact in messy, complicated ways. And all I've had to do is prepare 3 to 5 things, and great, like that's 3 sessions worth of prep right there.
Right.
Because everything else is just me reacting to what the players are doing.
It's kind of like a not prepping a sequence of events, but a prepping like a context for things to happen in. And like, okay, so this feud is going all right, and they've come up with an unusual way to try and solve it. And great, I could make the house fortified, and it'll be harder in that way, or I could just let them succeed. And now everyone's looking for a witch, and so like, and then they find a witch, and the witch is mad at you because the people came and found the witch, and so like,
Like, I'm not even involved in this, but everybody says, oh, it's a witch.
right,
So
right,
now I,
like
the witch, am mad at you.
right, and then like, just because that's in the world as a possibility, once the players are making a scene, it may connect with these other things that you've kind of know are out there as possibilities. Or
The blogger Justin Alexander over at the Alexandrian has popularized the phrase "prep situations, not plots,"
hmm, which
which
is it's yeah,
is pithy. I do think it requires some explanation. I don't think you can just kind of slap it on the table and be like, "Oh, that's everything you need to know." These 4 words, prep situations, not for these 4 words, but like, yeah, that kind of sums it up.
yeah, it's yeah, it is. Yeah. All right. There's
So I do want to
yeah.
talk about something else about this, though.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if there's anything else that you want to say, because
Yeah.
I was contemplating broach a new thing, and we'll leave that for some other call. So,
There is also here, though, an issue with player trust,
mm,
where the thing we have just laid out is, oh, it was a simple plan. Oh, you accepted this obvious plot hook that I, the GM, dangled in front of you? You fool! You absolute moron! Now you are in a sticky situation. Why did you ever trust me? And like in a lot of groups, especially groups that have not been playing together very long, that can set you up for a serious problem because then you are creating a situation where the next time the GM dangles an obvious plot hook in front of the players might say, well, the last time we followed your obvious plot hook, it got us into a lot of trouble. So forget your obvious plot hook. And then the GM's just like, well, this was all I had prepared for tonight. So I guess we're just going to stare at each other across the table for 3 hours until we all go home. And that's no good. So, if you have a lot of player trust at the table, right? If the players all say, you know what, we are confident that even if us following this obvious plot hook is going to get us into hot water, it's going to be entertaining hot water. It's hot water where we're not going to feel frustrated. We're going to say, oh, wow, what a fun situation. Maybe we're going to die now. How entertaining. Like, ideally, that's what you want. You want that level of player trust.
mhm.
But that player trust takes time to develop. In the vast majority of groups, in my opinion, you can't just roll out of the gate like our first session playing together. I can expect that level of trust, like absurd. So what you're going to want to do then, if you don't have that if you're not confident that you have that layer, that level of player trust or player buy-in, what you want to do is have part of the complications, part of the like, oh, the situation, it is not what you thought it was, be yes, it's a lot stickier and messier and uglier than you thought it was, but it's also a lot better than you thought it was.
Mm.
So, the family that hired you, oh yeah, now you're in all kinds of hot water now, but the family that hired you, they're actually way more influential than you knew, right? Actually, they have friends at the Capitol, and their friends are now your friends because you did a solid for them. Actually, they are a long line of sorcerers and mystics. And so from now on, whenever you need some like secret forbidden information, yeah, you can go talk to your friends, the family of sorcerers and mystics. You want to have that level of payoff where like, hey, you bit the obvious plot hook. Thank you. Thank you for biting the obvious plot hook. That means we actually do get to do something at game night tonight. Here is your reward. Here
Mm.
is your reward. And like, I, as a player, I am always delighted to jump feet first into the quicksand, right? The GM presents me with quicksand. It's like, oh boy, I'm going to jump right in. Like, maybe my character will drown in this quicksand. How exciting. But you for most players and most groups, you do really want to say, okay, you jumped in the quicksand, have some cake. Thank you for jumping in the quicksand.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that as like it's back and forth, right? And in the games that I publish, there is like it- we the players are telling the story together. The narrator or the GM is one of the players. You are all on the same team to tell the story. It is not antagonistic, right? So like hey, here's the quicksand, jump in it, please, is not like it's not like, aha, I got you now. It's like, great, we're participating in this work together because that's going to lead to some cool stuff that I've got for you next. Yeah, that's great. But that specific thing about like sweetening the deal, like it's better,
Mm-hmm.
it's both, because that is it is, yeah, it's both better and worse, right? Because then it's worse, but then it's also still worth it, yeah, it's good. It's good advice. It's good advice, Tristan. Ah, all right. Well, we talked about it. The links to these two blog posts will be in the video. Is there anything else you'd like to say about the blood feuds, or anything, or
What I will say is, if you enjoy this sort of thing, swing by the Molten Sulfur blog, moltensulfur.com. Make sure to subscribe to the mailing list, so that way you get a little email every time I put up a blog post. Also, if you're out there subscribing to the mailing list, if you don't want to receive a little email, I am also a professional RPG publisher, just like Matt, and I will point here at some of my work. Shanty Hunters, the game about singing and collecting magical sea shanties in 1880, is an award-winning, super cool thing that you should check out and you should purchase. Um, and stand by for the sequel, Ballad Hunters, set in 1813 England and Scotland, should be coming out next year, from Pelgrane Press, and
amazing.
very excited for that. It's going to be even better than Shanty Hunters, which I'm super pumped about. And Yeah, I've got other stuff out there that you can pay money for, and I also point at my primary body of work, my primary day job at this point, is a game called Nations and Cannons, which is a Dungeons and Dragons hack that is set during the American Revolutionary War, and it's very historical. It has a strong educational focus. You play as, spies and skirmishers and saboteurs, fighting in the American Revolution. And if you're familiar with the fifth edition Dungeons and Dragons rules, you will find it super easy to pick up, and it's really cool and great. And you can check that out at I believe nationsandcannons.com.
Excellent. That's all the stuff I was going to ask you to do, and there you did it all. So excellent.
Hooray!
Uh, Tristan, thank you so much for your time today to talk us through these blog posts. It's always a pleasure to talk to you about history and the game making. I think we got into more game philosophy than we do sometimes, and
Yeah,
that's also it's also fun to talk about that. So thank you. We'll have you back you know a couple times throughout the year. I think three more times at
yeah,
least.
yeah.
So thanks, and thank you to all the people who watched the video.